By adding tags to our system, we have changed a lot of the code inside of our post repository. But we're not done, because getting posts are just part of what a repository is for. We also need to add, update, and remove posts. And each one of these operations is going to involve tags in some way. Like, for example, if we remove a post, we also need to remove the tags associated with that post. Now, we're not actually removing the tags, but we are removing the mapping between the post and the tags. So let's start with the remove method, because this is going to be the most simple change that we are going to make. Now, first of all, we want to open up a connection to our database, so we are doing fine there. But instead of just deleting a post, we first of all need to retrieve the post from the database, because we need the ID of the post so that we can delete the mappings. So let's start by redefining the SQL variable, and we want to select all from posts where the slug is equal to whatever parameter was supplied, so at 0. And then this will allow us to get the post, and then we can delete the mappings, and then we can delete the post. So first of all, we want to create a post variable, and we want to call db.querySingle, and we can use the querySingle method here. We don't need to use any of the get methods that we rewrote in the previous lesson. Because we're not adding anything to these objects, we are simply selecting the post that we want to delete. So we will pass the SQL statement and then the slug for the value of our parameter. That will give us our post, but we might not have a post that exists. So if post equals to null, then we can just return, because there's really nothing more to do. Otherwise, we need to delete the tags that are associated with this post. So let's redefine SQL to delete from posts tags map. And we want to do that where the post ID equals to whatever value that we are going to supply the parameter. So then we want to execute that SQL statement. So we will call the execute method, pass SQL, and then we want the post ID, so we can do post.id. That is going to delete the mappings between the tags and this post. And then finally, we just want to delete the post. Now we can do so based upon the slug, but since we have the ID, let's just go ahead and use the ID. So here we will pass in post.id as the value for the parameter, and that's basically all that we should need to do for the remove method. And that leaves just two more methods, the edit method and then the add method. But it's more than just these two methods. We also need to modify our form so that we can manage the tags that are applied to a given post. So let's start there. Let's open up post.cshtml and let's add a select element. This is going to be a multiple selection element so that we can select all of the tags that will be applied to this post. So we want select, let's give it a name of post tags, and we want the multiple attribute. And then of course inside of the select element we are going to have a bunch of option elements that are the values of our tags. But first of all, we need to get our tags. So let's create a variable called tags. We will use our tag repository and use the getAll method to retrieve all of our tags, and then we will simply enumerate over our tags. So our tag in tags, and we want to output an option element. Let's set the value equal to @tag.id, and then we want to display @tag.name. So that will display all of our tags, but we should also take into account the tags that are applied to this post if we are editing the post. So one way that we can do that is, as we are enumerating over our tags, we can check to see if a given tag is already applied to our post. And if it is, then we can set the selected attribute on these option elements. So we can say selected equals to @post.tags. We will use the any extension method to check to see if the current tag is inside of our tags collection. So we want tag ID equals to tag.id, and that should give us everything that we want. Now we're getting a red squiggly here, cannot use a lambda expression as an argument to dynamically dispatch operation without first casting it to a delegate or expression tree type. Now, I'm not 100% sure that I completely understand what that says, so let's do post tags equals Let's cast this as an I enumerable of dynamic, and we will do post.tags. Then we can use post tags here. Let's see if this makes the red squiggly go away. I have a feeling it does. Great. So this isn't exactly what I wanted to do, but hey, it's going to work. Now let's take this post tags variable outside of this for each loop because we don't need to do that for every iteration. And we can just create this post tags up here before we even generate the form. Okay, so with this done, let's see if it works, because if it works, then we can just go on and go to the post handler, because that would be the next step in this process. So here we go to admin/post. Everything's working fine here, of course, but if we go to edit one of these posts, we can see that the first post, we are displaying the tags and they are both selected. So that is working well. Let's go to the second post. None of these should be selected, and that is the case. So all of this is working pretty well. Let's go to post/new, and we get an exception. System.dynamic.expandoObject does not contain a definition for tags. Where are we getting this? On line 13, whenever we are casting it. You know, we created an expando object in two places. One was inside of the repository. The other was inside of post.cs. So if we go down to this create post object, yes, this is where we need to do that. So we can say obj.tags equals a new list of dynamic, and then that should make the new post form work. So let's run this again, and we will need to go to /admin/post/new, and now we don't get any errors. So our form works. Now we need to go to our post handler and take the tags into account. Now, whenever we submit the form, it's going to take whatever values we have selected inside of the select box and separate them with commas. So if we select both the first tag and second tag, then we will have a value of 2,3 or 1,2. Whatever the IDs are, it's going to be ID for the first and then comma ID for the second. So we need to take that into account inside of our post handler. So let's go there. And let's retrieve that information from the form. Let's call this variable post tags, and we want to use our context and then request.form, and the name is post tags. Then we need to get this as integer values. So we can do var tags equals to post tags. We need to split that on a comma, because it is comma separated, and then we need to convert them into integer values. So we need to use a select. We can't use the cast method. I would like to use cast, but we can't cast. We have to convert. So we will select, and then we will use convert.toInt32, pass in v's for value, and then that will give us an array of integers. And we can pass that array of integers to our edit post and our create post methods. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just pass tags here. And we also want to do that for edit post. Now, of course, we are going to need to modify the parameters of these methods, but that is easy enough to do. For the create post, we will just simply add an I enumerable of int for tags. And we will do the same thing for the edit post method. So let's just copy that and let's paste it here for edit post. Now we don't want to do anything within the database inside of this method. We want to use our repository for that. So we are going to pass the tags to our repository's edit method. So after ID, we will just pass tags there. And whenever we create the post, we will do the same thing. After author ID, we will pass tags there. So then that takes us back to our repository. We need to add those parameters to our add and edit methods. So let's find our add method and let's add on that I enumerable of int for our tags. And after we create the post, we want to add in those tags. So after this call to execute, we want to add the tags. And since we are going to do this in both the add and the edit, let's write a helper method to do that. So we can call this add tags. We will pass in our tags. And let's also pass in the database object. Since we already have a database connection, there's really no need in creating another connection inside of this add tags method. Now for the edit method, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to update the mapping table. Instead, we could just delete the mapping for a given post and then add in new mappings. It's an extra step as far as the database is concerned, but I like that approach a lot better. So first of all, we want to delete tags. We will pass in, well, we don't really need to pass in anything except the database connection. Well, we do need the post ID as well. So we can do ID and then the database connection. And then we will call the add tags method, passing in the tags and then the database connection. Now we are already deleting tags, so we can go ahead and write this method and then use that inside of our remove method, because this is where we deleted all of those tags. So let's go ahead and write that. Let's make it private static void and delete tags. We need the ID of the post as well as the database connection, which is database. And we simply want to execute these 2 lines of code right there. So we can take that. We need a var in front of the SQL variable, and that will give us everything that we need, except we need to change post.id to simply ID. Then we can call this method. We will pass in the ID and the database object, and then that's it for that. Okay, so now we just need this add tags method. So let's add this as private static void add tags. We want an IEnumerable of int for the tags, which we will call tags, and then the database connection, DB. And the first thing we should do is to check to see if we have any tags to work with, because if we don't, then we don't have anything to do. So we will simply return. Otherwise, we will insert the tag information into the database. So insert into posts tags map, and we need the post ID and the tag ID and then values. So before we go any further, let's add the post ID here. So an int, and we'll call it post ID. Now, when it comes to inserting data into a SQL Server database, we can do so in 2 different ways. First, starting in 2008, I believe, we can insert multiple records using a single insert statement. That is something that I have never done before, and I am more than willing to give it a try. So that's what we're going to do. Now, I fully understand if you don't want to use that particular feature. I know people that don't like to use features that are exclusive to a particular platform because it makes moving to another platform a little bit difficult. Well, maybe not difficult, but a little more cumbersome. For me personally, if I am using a particular platform, I'm buying into that platform and I'm going to use whatever it has for me. So we are going to insert all of our tag information with a single SQL statement. And the syntax is pretty simple. We have the insert into post tags map, we have the columns and then the values, and we simply just supply multiple value sets. So I'm just going to make this up like for the post ID of 1 and then the tag ID of 2. And then we would have a comma and then post ID of 1 and then a tag ID of 3 and so on and so forth. So that's basically what we want to build. So let's see how we can do that. Let's create a variable called count, and let's start it at 1 so that we still want to use parameters here. We don't want to take raw information from the user and use that inside of our SQL statement. So for the post ID, we are going to use the parameter of @0. And then for the tag IDs, we will have @1, @2, and so on and so forth. So we'll start the count at 1. And let's create a variable called value sets. And let's select tags. We want to select the tag, and we want to use string.format. We're basically going to have our value sets here. So we want @0 for that parameter. And then we want and then our format identifier of 0. And then for that value, we can supply count++. That will give us all of that information. And let's make this an array, so toArray. And then we will use string.join and concatenate that with our SQL statements. So SQL plus equals, and we will use string.join. The separator is going to be a comma, and it can be a comma space, doesn't matter. And then the values are going to be values sets. And that should give us our SQL statement. Then we just want to execute that SQL statement. So db.execute, we want to pass in SQL, and then we need our information. Now, the first parameter is the post ID, but everything else is the tag information. So we can do tags.toArray, and that should work. So let's fire up SQL Server Management Studio. And while that is launching, let's run our application. Although we get an error. Let's see. No overload for method add tags. Takes 2 arguments. Oh yes. We need to pass in the post ID. Now, whenever we are adding a post, we don't have the ID until after we add it to the database. So we could tack on another SQL statement to this SQL variable that selects the identity, but I would rather just retrieve the post from the database. So we will call db.querySingle. We want to select all from posts where the slug is equal to @0. And we can pass in slug there. That will give us our post, which we can then use post.id as the first parameter to add tags. Now we need to find our other red dots over here. If you look over here with the scroll bar, you see these red dots. These are red squigglies. We need to find those and fix them. We basically have the same thing here. We just need to supply the ID. So we can do that because we have the ID there. And then finally, let's see, we have tags. Why is that? The name tags does not exist in the current context. Well, that would be because we did not add the enumerable of int called tags. Then we have one other red squiggly. So let's see what this is. Delete tags ID. So whenever we are calling the remove method, yes, we need to do post.id, and that should work now. So let's run this, and let's open up or make a connection to our SQL Server database engine. We want to go to our mapping table. I'm going to delete what we have inside of the mapping table. That way we know without a doubt if something is going to work. So let's delete those records. And let's go back to the browser. We want to go to admin/post. Let's go to new. Let's add a new. So this will be our third post. And this will be content for the third post. For the slug, we'll let that automatically be added. Same for the date published. And let's just do the second tag. So if we click on submit, hopefully we won't get any errors, but we do. So let's see, no mapping exists from object type of system.in32 to a known managed provider native type. Well, darn, I was hoping that that was going to work. Let's just try taking off the .toArray. I don't think that that's going to work because that is well, hey, that looks like that might indeed work. So let's just try it again and we will see what happens. Now, unfortunately, I think that added a new post. So let's just select here and we should see our third post. We do. So let's delete that. So let's edit, let's delete, and then we will go back to the browser. Let's go to post and then, or admin, post and then new. We'll do the whole thing again. We'll do third post, content, and then we will select the second tag, submit, and looks like the same thing. No mapping exists. Well, we can try one other thing. I think I was trying to be a little bit too clever for my own good. What I have in mind is creating a list of int, adding the tags to it, and then inserting the post ID. But you know what? That is really adding a lot of extra code just so that we could do this all in one SQL statement. And, that might be something that you really want to do, but we are trying to keep things simple. So forget about this. We'll just do this the old-fashioned way, and we will issue multiple SQL statements. So in this case, we will have @0 and @1 for the values. And then we will just use a for each for var tag in tags, and then we will issue the SQL statement. So db.execute, we want to pass in SQL. For the post ID, we still want post ID, and then for the tag ID, we will use tag. So that should work. It's not as sexy as what I was wanting to do, but you know what? If it works, that trumps sexy all the time. So let's go to admin and then post in the new. We need to go back to our database and let's delete this third post. And then we will try this once again. So post, content, and then the second tag. So if we click on submit, then it looked like everything worked. So if we look at the database, we can see that we do have our new post. If we look at the mapping, let's execute this. And that's not our mapping, is it? Let's look at our mapping. And now we should see one entry. We have the post ID of 6, which is what we have, and then the tag ID of 3. So creating a new post works fine. Let's edit a post. So let's go back to that third post and let's add the first tag so that both of these tags are selected. We'll click on submit and we get an error. Let's see that ambiguous column name ID. Well, I thought that we had avoided that, but I guess we need to look at the call stack. Where is this getting called? So we are starting with this get method with an ID. We are selecting all of the posts, TID as tag ID. I don't understand. Oh, except for the where clause. That would be the problem. So we can do p.id. Okay, so if we continue, then everything's going to crash. So let's go back. Let's resubmit. And then hopefully everything will work. The source file has changed. That's fine. I don't really care. Okay, we need to stop this then. So let's stop. Let's run it once again. Now this should work. So let's go to admin and then post. We want to edit the third post and assign the first tag as well. We click on submit and it looks like that worked. Okay, so now we have the ability to manage the tags for a given post. Now we need to start worrying about users and authentication, and we will start looking at that in the next lesson.